The envelope arrived on a rainy Tuesday in April, with the golden letterhead of Westfield Estates shining under the light in my office. Inside was a $100,000 bill for the refinancing of my parents' house, with my signature as the primary guarantor. A signature I had never given. "Thanks for helping us renovate the house, son. The interest rates were impossible, but with your name on it, we got a great rate. The first payment is due on the 15th. My mother's handwritten note was tucked into the paperwork, written in the same gold pen she used to sign Christmas cards. Christmas cards, incidentally, that I hadn't received last year. My name is Oliver Kane, and at 32, I just found out that my family considers me a walking, breathing bank account. What makes this even more infuriating is that I discovered this fact exactly 3 days after seeing on social media that I was the only member of the Kane family excluded from Easter lunch. While I was working in my Manhattan apartment, organizing financial reports for my clients, my sister Jessica was posting photos of the family tradition on Instagram. 23 people around my parents' mahogany table. Grandma Elena in her floral hat. Cousin James with his pregnant wife. Uncle Robert telling his bad jokes. Everyone but me. The caption read, "Family is everything. Blessed Easter with those who really matter." I called my mother right away. She answered on the third ring, with that syrupy voice she always used when she was about to manipulate me. "Oliver, honey. How are you? I hope you're not working too hard this holiday." "Mom, why wasn't I invited for Easter?" Silence. Then a theatrical sigh. "Oh darling, it was very last minute. Jessica organized everything and said you were too busy with work. You know how stressed she gets when she feels pressured by your success." Jessica stressed out by my success. The same Jessica who, at 29, still lived with her parents and changed her professional passion every 6 months. First it was artistic photography. Then life coaching. Currently, she was selling energy crystals online. "I would have come if I had been invited," I replied, keeping my voice under control. "Well, now you know for next year. By the way, honey, did you get the house papers? Your father thought it would be easier to put his name on the mortgage, considering your financial situation." There it was. Not even an apology for leaving me out. Just a smooth transition to the next financial favor they expected of me. I grew up in Westchester County, in a 6-bedroom colonial house where love always came with conditions. My father, Richard Kane, built his fortune in real estate, while my mother, Diana, devoted herself to maintaining our impeccable social reputation. Jessica was the charismatic blonde princess. I was the responsible son who facilitated everyone's whims. Throughout my teenage years, I paid for my own programming and economics classes. Jessica got writing lessons and musical theater classes. At 18, I got a partial scholarship to NYU. Jessica got a convertible car and the promise that money would never be a problem when she chose a college. She dropped out of 3 different universities. Today, I am a financial advisor with my own firm, specializing in estate planning for high-net-worth families. I have an apartment in Tribeca, a solid investment portfolio, and 0 debt. Jessica lives in her teenage bedroom and charges $50 for energy readings via video chat. But guess who always needs temporary help? Over the past 5 years, I've paid off Jessica's credit card twice. I covered my cousin Catherine's wedding budget shortfall. I financed Uncle Robert's medical emergencies, which conveniently coincided with football seasons in Las Vegas. Each favor came wrapped in family guilt and promises of eternal gratitude. Every time I hesitated, my mother reminded me how blessed I was with financial stability and how the family needed to support each other. Support each other. As if it were a two-way street. While I was analyzing the fraudulent documentation, a specific memory came to mind. 6 months earlier, I had organized a birthday dinner for my father. I booked a table at his favorite restaurant, invited the whole family, and paid the $3,200 bill. Jessica arrived 2 hours late, spent the entire evening on her phone, and left before dessert because she had an unbreakable commitment, which turned out to be a Tinder date. My father spent the entire evening praising her entrepreneurial spirit. Now, looking at the bill that could drain my emergency fund for the next 10 years, one thing was crystal clear: they didn't see me as a son or a brother. I was the family safe. A convenient resource to be accessed when needed, but expendable for the moments that really mattered. What they didn't know was that safes have locks. And some locks, Once locked, never open again. If you're following this story and have been through something similar with your family, leave a like and subscribe to the channel, because what happened next completely changed the dynamics of the Kane family. And it wasn't Jessica who came out on top this time. The call to my mother lasted exactly 17 minutes. 17 minutes of emotional manipulation so refined it could be studied in psychology courses. Oliver, dear, you're overreacting. Your father just put his name as a guarantor because the bank requires it. You won't even have to pay anything. It's just a formality. Formalities. As if 60 installments of $1,600 were irrelevant details. Mom, you forged my signature. That's a crime. Forged is a very strong word, darling. Jessica said you agreed over the phone. We must have misunderstood. Jessica. Always Jessica at the center of every family lie. My sister had a special talent for rewriting reality. At 29, she had managed to turn every personal failure into my responsibility. When she dropped out of journalism school, it was because Oliver made me feel stupid with his perfect grades. When she lost 3 jobs in a row, it was because the job market favors people like my brother. Even her latest financial crisis was my fault. She spent $8,000 on a spiritual retreat in Tulum, paid for with a credit card I had paid off 6 months earlier. When I questioned her financial responsibility, my mother called me in tears. Jessica is depressed, Oliver. She needs to find her purpose in life. You don't understand because you've always been successful. Successful. As if my apartment, my company, and my financial stability were gifts from heaven, not the result of 15 years of working 70 hours a week. My father, Richard Kane, had a different approach to manipulation. Where my mother used tears and guilt, he applied twisted business logic and subtle intimidation. Oliver, family is an investment. You invest in us, we invest in you. One day, this house will be your inheritance. The $2.5 million house that was now mortgaged in my name. The inheritance that could drain me financially for the next 10 years. The pattern had been clear for a long time. I was the son who made it, so it was my duty to support those who were still finding their way. Every professional achievement I made became a new family expectation. Every pay raise meant more requests for temporary help. 3 years ago, I paid off Jessica's credit card debt, $12,400 in Nordstrom purchases and Instagram-worthy trips. 2 years ago, I covered my mother's unexpected medical costs, $15,000 in cosmetic procedures she didn't want my father to know about. Last year it was my father's once-in-a-lifetime investment opportunity, $22,000 for a stake in a company that went bankrupt in 8 months. Each time the same promise, it's a loan of course. We'll pay you back as soon as things get better. The situation never got better. My loans became unwanted gifts. My attempts to collect became evidence that I was materialistic and didn't understand family values. But the mortgage was different. 60 installments of $1,600 weren't a one-time favor. It was a commitment that would consume my emergency fund, delay my plans to buy a bigger apartment, and make me officially responsible for the house where I wasn't even welcome for Easter. I need to think about it, I told my mother, ending the call. There's not much to think about, honey. The first payment is due on the 15th. I hung up and opened my laptop. 20 minutes of research confirmed my fears. I was legally responsible for the loan. My forged signature on the documents was convincing enough to pass the bank's verification. Technically, I could contest it on the grounds of fraud, but that would require suing my own parents. Which, of course, they knew I would never do. At 6:30, my phone rang. Jessica. Hey bro. Mom said you were a little stressed about the house. Look, I know it seems like a lot of money, but think of it this way, you're investing in the family fortune. Her aplomb was impressive. As if there was nothing wrong with forging my signature on a $100,000 loan. Jessica, you guys committed fraud. Oh Oliver, fraud is a big word. Dad just put your name on it because you have the best credit score in the family. It's financial strategy. Financial strategy. As if I were a business tool, not a human being with autonomy over my own decisions. Besides, she continued, you can deduct the interest on your taxes. It's almost like you're making money by helping us. The twisted logic was enough to make anyone's head spin. In Jessica's version, I should be grateful for being included in a scam that exclusively benefited my parents. And another thing, she added, with the casual tone she used to drop emotional bombs, I hope you're not upset, but I kind of told everyone at Easter that you were going to help with the house renovation. Everyone was really impressed by your generosity. My generosity. A generosity I didn't know I was displaying. What renovation? Oh man, didn't Mom tell you? They're renovating the entire kitchen. Carrara marble, Viking appliances, a giant center island. It's going to be amazing. And thanks to you, of course. $70,000 on a kitchen remodel. Financed in my name, for a house where I wasn't welcome at family celebrations. The call ended with Jessica inviting me to see the remodeling plans next weekend. As if my presence was necessary to approve how my own money would be spent. That night, I meticulously reviewed my financial situation. I had $300,000 invested, $80,000 in checking and savings, and a paid-off apartment valued at $1.2 million. On paper, I could absorb the fraudulent loan without compromising my standard of living. But it wasn't about the money. It was about the precedent. If I paid this mortgage without resistance, what would be the next family favor? A loan for Jessica to open her crystal shop? A second mortgage for my parents to buy the summer house in the Hamptons they've always coveted? An investment in my father's latest business idea? For the first time in my adult life, I seriously contemplated cutting ties with my family. Not temporarily, as I had done a few times during arguments, but permanently. The idea both frightened and liberated me. I was mulling over this possibility when my phone buzzed with an Instagram notification. Jessica had posted a photo of my parents' house with the caption, "Dream renovation starting soon. When you have an amazing brother who supports your family projects. #blessed, #family, #dream coming true." The photo had 43 likes and several comments praising my generosity and brotherly love. I was being publicly credited for a donation I hadn't made, for a renovation I hadn't approved, in a house where I wasn't welcome. As I read the comments full of admiration for my family kindness, an idea began to form. If my parents wanted to play this game using my name and reputation as currency, maybe it was time they found out that some coins have two sides. And the side they were about to see would be very different from what they expected. What they didn't know was that I had access to information about their finances that would make this situation much more interesting. Information that, used strategically, could completely transform who had power in this family. The following Friday, I decided to investigate my parents' finances more thoroughly. As a financial advisor, I had access to databases that most people didn't even know existed. Information about credit history, suspicious transactions, debt patterns. What I discovered made me sick. Over the past 18 months, my parents had taken out 7 different loans using my name as a reference. Not as a guarantor, not yet, but as an emergency contact and moral guarantee of payment. Each application cited my financial stability as justification for approval. A personal loan of $25,000 for urgent medical expenses. A $15,000 loan for business equipment. A $30,000 revolving line of credit for investment opportunities. $70,000 in debt that I knew nothing about, all backed by my financial reputation. But the worst was yet to come. Digging deeper, I discovered that Jessica had opened 3 business credit cards for her spiritual wellness consulting. On each application, she listed Kane Financial Consulting, my company, as a business partner, suggesting that my established business would guarantee her payments. She was using my company as an alibi to get credit she could never get on her own. The combined limit on the 3 cards was $42,000. All of them were maxed out. I called my accountant, Andrew Morrison, who had handled both my personal and business finances for 8 years. "Oliver, I need to tell you something," he said as soon as I brought it up. "I've been getting a lot of calls over the last few months. People identifying themselves as investors interested in Kane Financial, wanting to check our financial health." "What kind of questions?" "Very specific questions. Annual revenue, number of clients, emergency reserves. The kind of information someone would need to use our company as collateral for something." Andrew was clearly uncomfortable. I thought it was strange, but since you never mentioned looking for investors, I didn't pass on any confidential information. I just confirmed that the company was operational and in good standing. "Did you recognize any of the names?" One of them identified himself as Richard Kane. He said he was considering a family investment. My father. Checking the financial health of my company to use it as collateral in other fraudulent schemes. That night, I called my cousin Emma, Aunt Patricia's daughter. We had been close as children, but had lost touch when she moved to Boston 5 years ago. Oliver. What a surprise, she said, genuinely excited. How are you? I heard you didn't come for Easter. Emma, I need to ask you something. Did Aunt Patricia mention that you had financial problems with my father years ago? Silence. Then a heavy sigh. My father lost $28,000 in a guaranteed investment your father offered him. Shares in a biotech company that was supposed to revolutionize cancer treatments. And what happened? The company never existed. It was just elaborate paperwork. When my father tried to get his money back, Uncle Richard said that investments always have risks and that the documentation was clear about that. Technically, it wasn't fraud, just an opportunity that didn't work out. Emma continued, the bitterness evident in her voice. My parents were so ashamed that they never told anyone in the family. They thought they'd look foolish for falling for the scam. I only found out the truth when Dad had his heart attack and I had to organize his finances. Why didn't Aunt Patricia ever tell me? Because she knew you'd eventually find out on your own. And because she hoped you'd be different from your parents. Different. As if there was any chance I wouldn't discover that my entire family was a criminal organization disguised as a respectable dynasty. After the call with Emma, I spent hours researching legal precedents for family fraud. What I learned was both encouraging and terrifying. Yes, I could sue my parents for document fraud. Yes, I could contest every loan where my name was used without authorization. Yes, I could demand that Jessica remove my company as a reference on her fraudulent applications. But I also learned that family fraud cases were extremely complicated. Prosecutors were reluctant to pursue them because juries often sympathized with domestic disputes. Banks preferred out-of-court settlements to avoid negative publicity. And my family knew it. They were betting that I would never have the courage to expose them publicly. That my professional reputation was too important to risk in a family scandal. That I would rather pay quietly than make the Kanes a headline. For 29 years, that bet had paid off. But as I pored over piles of fraudulent documents scattered across my home office desk, a fundamental shift took place inside me. It wasn't a dramatic moment of rage or vengeful determination. It was more subtle. Like realizing you no longer need something you always thought was essential. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need the conditional love that came with a price tag. I didn't need to pretend we were a functional family to protect a reputation that was already being used against me. For the first time in my adult life, I felt genuinely free. On Monday morning, I made 3 decisions that would change everything. First, I hired a lawyer specializing in financial crimes. Not to threaten my parents, but to methodically document every instance of fraud. Second, I hired a private investigator to track down every suspicious financial transaction involving the Kane name over the past 5 years. Third, I opened a completely separate bank account and began transferring my assets to institutions where my family would never have access or influence. What my parents didn't know was that I had spent 8 years building a pristine reputation in the financial world. Clients trusted me with millions because they knew I operated with absolute integrity. That reputation wasn't just my protection. It was my weapon. While they continued to use my name for their schemes, I was quietly building a dossier that would prove not only their current fraud, but a pattern of criminal behavior that stretched back decades. And when the time came to present that dossier, it wouldn't be to courts that were hesitant to prosecute families. It would be to federal regulatory agencies that took financial fraud very, very seriously. What they also didn't know was that some of my most important clients worked in strategic positions in the federal banking system. People who would be genuinely offended to learn that the integrity of a respected colleague was being exploited by family criminals. On Wednesday of that week, Jessica called me urgently. Her voice sounded strange, less confident than usual. Oliver, something strange has come up. Someone from the bank is asking questions about the company cards. Have you said anything to them? What kind of questions? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. About the partnership between my consulting firm and your company. They want official documentation of the partnership. Of course they did. Because there was no partnership. There was just Jessica using my name to get fraudulent credit. I haven't spoken to any bank, I replied honestly. But if they're investigating, maybe it's because they've found some inconsistencies. The silence on the other end lasted 15 seconds. Oliver, you wouldn't do anything to hurt the family, would you? Like turn us in to the banks or something? The question revealed that she was finally understanding the gravity of the situation. And that for the first time, she was questioning whether I would continue to be the obedient son who quietly absorbed all the financial blows. Jessica, I said calmly, you used my company as collateral to get $42,000 in credit. That's a federal crime. But we're family. Families help each other. Families help each other. Criminals exploit each other. I hung up before she could respond. 2 hours later, my father called. His voice had the controlled tone he used when he was genuinely concerned. Oliver, we need to talk. In person. Tonight. About what? You know what about. Yes, I knew. They had finally realized that the obedient son had grown up and learned to roar. If you've made it this far in this transformation story and are rooting to see how it all unfolds, leave a like and subscribe to the channel, because the confrontation that took place that night forever changed the balance of power in the Kane family. And it revealed exactly how much power I had accumulated while they thought I was just paying the bills. The meeting with my father took place in his office, an intimidating space of dark wood and golf trophies that always made me feel like an employee being reprimanded. This time, the feeling was different. Oliver, sit down, he said, gesturing to the leather chair across from his desk. We need to clear up this confusion about the house. Mess. As if $100,000 in fraud was an administrative misunderstanding. There's no mess, Dad. You forged my signature. He leaned back in his chair, interlacing his fingers with a condescending patience he reserved for explaining complex concepts to simple minds. Oliver, family is a business. A mutual investment. You invest in us, we invest in you. That house will one day be your inheritance. An inheritance mortgaged in my name, which I'll be paying off for the next 10 years. Details, he waved his hand. The important thing is that we're building family wealth. Jessica understands that. Why can't you? Jessica. Always the gold standard of family complacency. Over the next 3 days, I implemented the first phase of my plan. I hired Rebecca Chun, a financial crime attorney I had met through a client. Her reputation for dismantling complex family schemes was legendary. I've seen cases like this before, she told me during our initial consultation. Families that use a successful member as personal financial collateral. What makes your case interesting is the multiple loans and corporate fraud. I handed her 3 meticulously organized binders. Documentation of every fraudulent loan, bank records, evidence of Jessica using my company as false collateral. Impressive, Rebecca murmured as she leafed through the documents. You've documented everything. I've been in finance for 8 years. Documentation is second nature. The private investigator, Thomas Wright, was even more blunt. Your family operates like a small criminal organization, he said after reviewing the material. Classic pattern, one productive member supports the illegal activities of the others. It usually works because the victim is afraid of exposing the family. I don't have that fear. Then we're going to find everything. While Thomas was investigating, I got a call from Jessica. Her voice had lost all pretense of sisterly sweetness. Oliver, what are you doing? The bank is asking questions about my cards. Strange people are calling our relatives. What kind of questions? About my company. About you. About our family. Her irritation was palpable. Can't you just accept that we're family and help each other out? Mutual help implies consent, Jessica. You committed fraud. Fraud is an exaggeration. Dad just made the process easier because he knew you'd agree. Her circular logic would be comical if it weren't so revealing. In Jessica's mind, my consent was assumed, not required. Besides, she continued, you're being selfish. We have a family reputation to uphold. If you create a scandal, you'll hurt all of us. Family reputation. The concept they used as a shield whenever anyone questioned their ethics. 2 days later, Thomas called me with findings that exceeded my worst expectations. Oliver, your family has been involved in fraud dating back 15 years. I found at least a dozen families who lost money in your father's investments. Shell companies, miniature Ponzi schemes, misuse of confidential information. Solid evidence. Complete documentation. Your father is meticulous about keeping records, probably to protect himself legally. Ironically, those records now constitute incriminating evidence. The most shocking discovery came on Friday. Thomas found an offshore bank account in the Cayman Islands, opened in my name without my knowledge 2 years ago. The account was used to launder money from at least 3 fraudulent schemes, he explained. If the authorities discover this before you report it, you could be charged as an accessory. My family wasn't just exploiting me. They were setting me up to be the scapegoat for their criminal activities. That night, I called Rebecca. I need immediate protection. We found evidence that my name is being used in federal crimes. I'll start the identity theft reporting procedures first thing tomorrow morning, she replied. What about Oliver? This is going to get ugly. His family will face serious criminal charges. I understand. But they escalated the situation before I could. On Saturday morning, I got a call from my bank manager. Mr. Kane, we have some suspicious transactions on your account. Someone tried to transfer $75,000 last night. $75,000. Exactly the amount in my emergency account. The transfer was blocked by our security system, but we need you to come to the bank immediately. As I rushed to the bank, my phone rang. My mother. Oliver, dear, there's been a misunderstanding with your account. Jessica mentioned that you had agreed to help with some of the renovation costs. They had tried to drain my emergency account. $75,000 that had taken me years to save, almost wiped out in one unauthorized overnight transaction. How did you guys get access to my account? Well, honey, Jessica remembered your password. You used Grandma Elena's birthday, didn't you? You've always been sentimental about those things. Sentimental. They used my emotional connection to my late grandmother to steal my savings. It was at that moment that any remaining family loyalty died completely. At the bank, I discovered that the transfer attempt had been made from my old laptop, the one I had given my parents the year before. They had kept access to my saved passwords and tried to use that information for a large-scale theft. We're going to process this as attempted wire fraud, said the manager. It's a federal crime. When I left the bank, my phone was blowing up with messages. Jessica, my parents, even distant cousins, all with slightly different versions of the same narrative. I was being ungrateful, destructive, selfish. Jessica went further, posting an old photo of us on Instagram with the caption, "When people you love turn into strangers #family betrayal #toxic people." 37 comments from relatives and friends expressing solidarity with poor Jessica and condemning my inexplicable behavior. They were constructing a public narrative where I was the villain, the ungrateful son who abandoned his family in their hour of need. But narratives can be rewritten. And I had enough evidence to not only defend myself, but to expose 15 years of systematic criminal activity. If you've been following this story of family manipulation and hoping to see justice done, leave a like and subscribe to the channel, because the counteroffensive I launched on Monday completely changed who was controlling the narrative. That night, I made my decision. I would no longer be the obedient son who silently absorbed the financial blows. I would not be the scapegoat for their fraud. And I would definitely not allow them to destroy my reputation while protecting theirs. What they didn't know was that a financial advisor with 8 years of experience has access to resources that amateur criminal families don't even know exist. And on Monday, I would start using every one of them. On Monday at 8 a.m., I implemented the first phase of my counteroffensive. I called Sarah Morrison, the compliance director at the bank that had approved the fraudulent home loan. Sarah, Oliver Kane. I need to report multiple instances of document fraud involving my family. 20 minutes later, I was in her office with 3 organized folders. Forged mortgage documentation, evidence of attempts to access my accounts, records of loans where my name was used as unauthorized collateral. Jesus, Oliver, she muttered, leafing through the documents. This is systematic. How many years? At least 5 that I can prove. Possibly more. We're going to launch a full investigation. The FBI will be notified due to the fraudulent use of financial information across state lines. FBI. The word that would transform my parents from family manipulators into federal criminals. At 10 in the morning, Thomas Wright called me with devastating updates. Oliver, I found the connection to the offshore account. Your father used your name and social security number to open not just one account, but three. A total of $240,000 in suspicious transactions. $240,000 laundered using my identity. My father wasn't just exploiting me, he was setting me up to be indicted for federal crimes I knew nothing about. There's more, Thomas continued. Jessica registered a consulting firm using your company as its tax address. She's reporting non-existent income and using it to justify business loans. How much in loans? $85,000 so far. All based on her false association with your reputation. My family had built a fraud empire using my name as its foundation. And when it all came crashing down, I would be the first to be investigated. At 11:15, Rebecca Chen called me. Oliver, we need to move fast. The bank has reported suspicious activity to federal authorities. We have a 48-hour window before official investigations begin. If you don't come forward as a victim first, you could be classified as an accomplice. What's our next move? Let's go to the FBI. Now. The federal office in Manhattan was exactly as I had imagined it, efficient, intimidating, and full of people who took financial crimes extremely seriously. Special Agent Maria Rodriguez reviewed my documentation with surgical precision. Mr. Kane, your family operated a very sophisticated identity fraud scheme. Unauthorized use of personal information to obtain credit, opening offshore accounts to launder money, creating fake business entities to justify loans. She paused, studying my face. The question is whether you were a victim or a participant. Agent Rodriguez, I brought all the documentation proving that I discovered these frauds just this week. I have records of my attempts to block unauthorized access to my accounts. I see. And I appreciate your cooperation. We will need a formal statement and authorization to thoroughly investigate your family's finances. As I signed documents authorizing the federal investigation, my phone exploded. Jessica had discovered that her corporate credit cards had been blocked. Oliver, what did you do? My cards have been canceled. The bank is asking for documentation of our business partnership. What partnership, Jessica? You used my company as false collateral without my authorization. But we're family. You can't turn me in. You committed corporate fraud using my reputation. That's a federal crime. The silence lasted 15 seconds. Oliver, did you really do that? Did you report us? Jessica, you tried to steal $75,000 from my account last week. You used my name on fraudulent loans. You opened offshore accounts in my name to launder money. I didn't report you. I protected myself from criminals who happened to be my family. 2 hours later, my father called. His normally controlled voice trembled with anger and panic. Oliver, federal agents are at my house. What the hell have you done? Dad, I reported the fraud you committed using my name. Those aren't frauds. They're family arrangements. You're destroying this family for money. Family arrangements don't involve forging signatures or opening offshore bank accounts using other people's documents. Son, his voice changed to the manipulative tone I knew so well, you can stop this. Tell the agents it was a misunderstanding. That you authorized everything verbally. He still didn't get it. He still thought I was the obedient son who would absorb any abuse to keep the peace in the family. Dad, it's too late. You escalated this beyond the point of no return when you tried to drain my emergency account. Oliver, if you don't stop this investigation, you will never be welcome in this family again. Dad, I replied calmly, a family that commits federal crimes using my name is not a family I want. At 6 o'clock, Rebecca called me with updates. Oliver, your father has hired Howard Steinberg, high-level criminal lawyer. This confirms that they are taking the charges seriously. Now what? Now we wait. Federal investigations take time, but with the documentation we've provided, it's almost impossible for them to escape formal charges. That night, I received messages from relatives I barely spoke to during the year, all with variations on the same narrative. I was being vindictive, destructive, ungrateful. How could I destroy my own family for money? The irony was absurd. They had exploited me financially for years, used my name to commit federal crimes, tried to steal my savings, and I was the villain for protecting myself legally. But the most revealing message came from my cousin Emma. "Oliver, my dad just told me that Uncle Richard tried to involve him in a similar scheme 3 years ago. Dad refused and was cut off from the family for 6 months. We thought it was just a tantrum. Looks like you've uncovered a much larger pattern." A much larger pattern. My family weren't just opportunistic exploiters. They were systematic criminals who had been operating for decades, using relatives as unwitting collateral for their schemes. On Tuesday morning, I got the call that changed everything. "Agent Rodriguez. Mr. Kane, we found evidence that your family has used the identities of at least 6 different relatives in fraudulent schemes over the course of 15 years. Your case was the most elaborate, but not the only one. 6 relatives. 15 years. I wasn't an exception. I was just the latest target of a family criminal operation that had destroyed multiple lives. What's the next step?" "Formal charges will be filed on Friday. Electronic fraud, money laundering, identity theft. Multiple federal charges with potential sentences ranging from 10 to 20 years. I hung up the phone and for the first time in weeks, I felt genuinely at peace. It wasn't revenge I felt, but relief. The feeling of finally being free from people who had spent decades using me as a financial tool. What my parents didn't understand is that when you build an empire using someone else's reputation as the foundation, that person has the power to tear it all down with a single phone call. And that's exactly what happened. On Thursday, the day before the formal charges were filed, my mother made one last attempt at manipulation. Her voicemail message was a masterpiece of emotional blackmail. "Oliver, your father is having heart problems from the stress. Jessica is in a deep depression. You can stop this at any time. Just say it was a misunderstanding. Don't destroy your family out of pride." Pride. As if protecting yourself from federal crimes was a matter of ego. I didn't return the call. On Friday at 9 in the morning, Richard Kane, Diana Kane, and Jessica Kane were formally indicted on 17 federal counts. The headline in the local newspaper read, "Prominent Westchester family charged with multimillion-dollar fraud scheme." The photo showed my father being escorted out of his home by federal agents, his handcuffs glinting in the morning sun. 29 years later, I finally discovered what it meant to have a family that respected me. Ironically, that family did not include any Kanes. 6 months after the federal charges, the sentence came on a sunny October morning. Richard Kane, 8 years in federal prison for wire fraud and money laundering. Diana Kane, 5 years for conspiracy and identity theft. Jessica Kane, 3 years in prison and restitution of $85,000. The headline in the Westchester Journal read, "Kane family sentenced in multi-million-dollar fraud scheme." I wasn't in court. I didn't need to be. That same morning, I was signing the final papers for the sale of the family home. $2.5 million that would go directly to reimburse the victims of my parents' fraud. Emma helped me set up a restitution fund for relatives who had lost money over the years. The irony was perfect. The house they tried to use to hold me financially hostage became the instrument of justice for his victims. Thomas Wright called me with the final report of his investigation. "Oliver, we found 17 different families who were harmed by your parents' schemes. The restitution fund will cover almost all of their losses." 17 families. 15 years of systematic crime. And I had been just the latest target. The transformation in my life was complete, but not in the way I had expected. I felt no vindictive satisfaction watching my family get sued. I felt relief. As if I could finally breathe after years of holding my breath. My company prospered beyond expectations. Clients respected my integrity even more after they learned that I had sacrificed family relationships to protect my professional ethics. The scandal, ironically, strengthened my reputation in the financial industry. Leah became my best friend and confidant. Her family completely adopted me during the holidays. I discovered that Christmas with people who genuinely wanted me there was infinitely better than family obligations based on financial exploitation. Emma and I restructured our relationship as cousins. She told me that other relatives had similar stories with my parents, but had never had the courage to speak up. My decision to sue them gave voice to decades of silent financial abuse. The only message I received from prison came from Jessica, 3 months after sentencing. Oliver, I now understand what you meant about real family versus exploitation. Mandatory therapy here has shown me that we spent years treating you like an ATM instead of a brother. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that you were right. I didn't respond, but I kept the letter. Not as a trophy, but as evidence that people can change when they finally face the consequences of their actions. Dr. Chun continued to help me process the residual family guilt. Oliver, you didn't destroy a family, she reminded me during our last session. You exposed criminals who pretended to be family. There's a fundamental difference. She was right. Real families don't commit federal crimes using your name. Real families don't try to drain your savings without permission. Real families don't exclude you from celebrations while exploiting your financial reputation. A year later, I met my father outside his parole hearing. He had aged 20 years in 12 months. His hair was completely gray, his posture hunched, his air of corporate authority completely gone. Oliver, he said, his voice hoarse. I didn't expect to see you here. I came to testify that you still pose a financial risk, I replied calmly. The judge needed to know about the offshore accounts that have not yet been recovered. His face contorted with a mixture of anger and despair. You really destroyed us completely. Father, I protected myself from criminals. You destroyed yourselves. He walked away without another word. It was the last time I would ever speak to Richard Kane. Today, 2 years later, I have a thriving business, healthy relationships based on mutual respect, and peace of mind I haven't known in decades. My Tribeca apartment has become a gathering place for holidays with my chosen family, people who value me for who I am, not what I can provide. The most important lesson I learned is that family loyalty is not a one-way street. True love does not come with strings attached. And sometimes, protecting your integrity requires cutting ties that should be sacred but have become toxic. If you've come this far on your journey of self-discovery and justice, subscribe to the channel for more stories from people who chose self-respect over toxic family obligations. Leave a like if this story inspired you to set healthy boundaries in your own life. Last week, I received a birthday card signed by 17 families, all victims of my parents' schemes, now compensated by the restitution fund. Thank you for having the courage we didn't have, read one of the messages. Courage. It wasn't revenge I had sought. It was just the courage to say no to people who confused family love with a license to commit crimes. And that courage gave me something their money could never buy, a real family.